Trapped in a whirlwind of passion and betrayal, Joséphine's wedding to Napoleon was a spark destined to ignite chaos. Welcome to the story of a love that shook an empire. Paris in 1796 was a city pulsing with the aftershocks of revolution, where ambition and survival went hand in hand. Marie-Joseph Rose Taché de la Pagerie, known to the world as Joséphine, stood at the center of this chaotic stage. A 32-year-old widow from Martinique, she carried the weight of a turbulent past. Her first husband, Alexandre de Beauharnais, a French aristocrat, had been guillotined during the Reign of Terror, leaving her alone with two children, Hortense and Eugène. Joséphine wasn't just a survivor, she was a master of reinvention. With her Creole charm, sharp wit, and sultry elegance, she navigated the salons of Paris, captivating powerful men to secure her place in a treacherous world. But her reputation was far from spotless. Whispers of affairs and mounting debts followed her like a shadow. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte, a 26-year-old Corsican artillery officer with a burning hunger for greatness. He was no polished nobleman, but a scrappy outsider, his thick accent and modest roots setting him apart in France's elite circles. Yet his military victories were turning heads, and he was determined to climb the social ladder. When he met Joséphine, he saw more than a woman. He saw a gateway to the aristocratic world he craved. Her connections to Paris's high society and her refined allure dazzled him. To Napoleon, Joséphine was a prize, a symbol of the status he desperately wanted. Their wedding on March 9, 1796, was meant to seal this union of ambition and desire. But it was riddled with warning signs from the very start. The ceremony itself was a comedy of errors, hinting at the deeper flaws in their bond. Joséphine arrived hours late, leaving a fidgeting Napoleon waiting at the registry office. When they finally stood together, the paperwork only added to the farce. Joséphine, ever conscious of her age, lied on the marriage certificate, claiming to be younger, while Napoleon, eager to close the gap, added a few years to his own age. These small deceptions were more than quirks. They revealed a relationship built on mistrust and pretense. Joséphine's reluctance to be fully honest about her age spoke to her insecurity about losing her allure, while Napoleon's fudging of his age betrayed his need to prove he belonged beside her. Their letters from this time paint a stark picture of their mismatched hearts. Napoleon poured his soul into his words, writing feverish, almost obsessive declarations of love. In one letter, sent just days after their wedding, he wrote, "I awake full of you. Your image haunts me, and I cannot rest until I see you again." His passion was all-consuming, his adoration bordering on worship. Joséphine's replies, however, were a different story. Her letters were polite, even warm, but lacked the same fire. She wrote of her health, her social engagements, or vague pleasantries, rarely matching his intensity. To her, Napoleon was a means to an end, a rising star who could offer the security she'd fought so hard to regain after the Terror. While he dreamed of a grand romance, she saw a practical alliance. Their differences went beyond emotions. Joséphine's life had been shaped by survival, her charm honed through years of navigating dangerous waters. She spent lavishly, adorning herself in silks and jewels, piling up debts that would later infuriate Napoleon. Her world was one of elegance and improvisation, where appearances mattered more than discipline. Napoleon, on the other hand, was a man of order, his military mind craving structure and control. His Corsican upbringing left him with a chip on his shoulder, a nagging sense that he didn't quite belong in the glittering Parisian society Joséphine moved through so effortlessly. Her nonchalance clashed with his intensity, her extravagance with his frugality. Even their physical differences, her graceful poise against his short, wiry frame, seemed to underscore their incompatibility. Then there were the whispers about Joséphine's past. Paris gossiped about her relationships with men like Paul Barras, a powerful figure in the revolutionary government. Some even claimed Barras had passed Joséphine to Napoleon, a rumor that stung the proud young general. Whether true or not, these stories fed Napoleon's insecurities, planting seeds of doubt about her loyalty. Joséphine, for her part, seemed unbothered by the gossip, but her casual attitude only deepened the rift. She wasn't the devoted, pure-hearted bride Napoleon wanted to believe in, and he wasn't the stable, aristocratic savior she might have hoped for. Their marriage, barely begun, was already a house built on sand, beautiful on the outside, but fragile beneath. Barely 2 days after their wedding, Napoleon left Paris for the battlefields of Italy, commanding the French army in a campaign that would cement his legend. Joséphine stayed behind, surrounded by the glittering salons of the capital, but the physical distance between them only deepened the emotional chasm already present. Napoleon, consumed by his love, sent her torrents of letters, each one brimming with longing and desperation. "Not one letter from you," he wrote in April 1796, his words dripping with anguish. "You love me no longer. I am wretched." His heart was laid bare, but Joséphine's silence, or her brief, tepid replies, spoke volumes. She was living her life in Paris, attending balls and dinners, while Napoleon fought for glory and her affection. Rumors began to swirl, and they weren't kind to Joséphine. Paris buzzed with tales of her flirtations, particularly with a dashing young officer named Hippolyte Charles. He was everything Napoleon wasn't: tall, charming, and effortlessly aristocratic. Whispers reached Napoleon that Joséphine was spending far too much time with this lieutenant, her laughter and charm directed at someone else. Whether these were full-blown affairs or just playful dalliances, the gossip stung Napoleon deeply. His letters grew sharper, mixing adoration with accusations. "You are cruel," he wrote, "to mock my love while I risk my life for France." Joséphine, ever elusive, brushed off his concerns with vague reassurances, but her actions, or lack thereof, only fueled his paranoia. The distance wasn't just physical, it exposed their fundamentally different priorities. Napoleon saw his campaigns as a way to build a future for them both, dreaming of a grand empire with Joséphine at his side. But Joséphine seemed more concerned with the present, her social status, her luxurious lifestyle, her place in Paris's elite circles. She spent recklessly, buying dresses and jewels, hosting lavish parties that kept her at the center of attention. Her debts mounted, and Napoleon, far away, received reports of her extravagance. He was torn between his military duties and his obsession with her, his letters oscillating between pleas for her love and demands for her loyalty. Joséphine's reluctance to join Napoleon in Italy became another sore point. He begged her to come, writing, "Come to me, my soul, or I shall die of longing." But Joséphine delayed, citing her health or her children's needs. In truth, she was reluctant to leave the comforts of Paris for the uncertainties of a war-torn country. When she finally did travel to Italy in the summer of 1796, her arrival was less a romantic reunion and more a begrudging obligation. Napoleon was overjoyed, showering her with affection, but Joséphine remained distant, her heart seemingly elsewhere. Witnesses noted her lack of enthusiasm, her smiles polite but strained. The contrast was stark. Napoleon, the brilliant general, was utterly vulnerable to her, while Joséphine seemed to hold him at arm's length. The Italian campaign also revealed another crack in their bond: Napoleon's growing ambition. As he conquered cities and amassed power, his vision for himself expanded. He began to see Joséphine not just as a wife, but as a potential partner in a grander destiny. Yet Joséphine, with her checkered past and questionable loyalty, didn't fit the image of the impeccable consort he now imagined. Her rumored indiscretions and carefree attitude clashed with the disciplined, imperial future he was starting to envision. The more Napoleon achieved, the more he questioned whether Joséphine could keep up with his soaring dreams. By the time Napoleon returned to Paris in late 1797, Triumphant from his victories, the marriage was strained by months of separation, suspicion, and unspoken resentments. Joséphine greeted him warmly, but the rumors about Hippolyte Charles lingered, and Napoleon's trust was fraying. Their reunion was bittersweet, a moment of passion overshadowed by doubts that neither could fully dispel. The battlefield had made Napoleon a hero, but it had also exposed the fragility of their bond, leaving them teetering on the edge of a love that could not withstand the weight of their differences. As Napoleon's star rose, so did the pressures on his marriage to Joséphine. By 1798, he was no longer just a general, but a national hero, his conquests in Italy and Egypt making him the talk of Europe. Joséphine, now at his side in Paris, was thrust into a new role, one she wasn't fully prepared for. The couple moved into a lavish home on the Rue de la Victoire, a symbol of their rising status. But beneath the grandeur, their relationship was buckling under the strain of Napoleon's ambitions and a deeply personal issue: Joséphine's inability to give him an heir. Napoleon's dreams were growing bigger than ever. He wasn't just fighting for France anymore. He was envisioning an empire, a dynasty with his name etched into history. For that, he needed a child, a son to carry on his legacy. Joséphine, now in her mid-30s, had 2 children from her first marriage, but no pregnancies followed with Napoleon. Whispers began to circulate, and the blame fell squarely on her. Medical knowledge at the time was crude, and many assumed Joséphine was barren, a devastating accusation in a society that prized fertility in women, especially those tied to power. Napoleon's family, particularly his mother, Laetitia, and his siblings, never fully accepted Joséphine. They saw her as an outsider, a woman with a scandalous past, and they seized on her childlessness to question her worth as his wife. Joséphine was acutely aware of the pressure. She visited doctors, tried remedies, and even travelled to spa towns like Plombières, hoping the mineral waters might work a miracle. Her desperation was palpable. She knew that without a child, her hold on Napoleon was precarious. Meanwhile, Napoleon's devotion, once unwavering, began to waver. In Egypt, during his 1798 campaign, he took a mistress, Pauline Fourès, a young woman dubbed his Cleopatra. The affair was brief, but it sent shockwaves back to Paris. Joséphine heard the rumors, and for the first time, she faced the reality that Napoleon's love might not be enough to secure her place. When he returned in 1799, she confronted him, her tears and pleas softening his anger, but the damage was done. The trust between them was eroding, replaced by a growing awareness of their divergent paths. Napoleon's rise to first consul in 1799, after a daring coup, only heightened the stakes. Joséphine played the part of the elegant hostess, charming diplomats and politicians at his side, but her role felt increasingly performative. She was no longer the confident socialite who had captivated Paris. She was a woman fighting to keep her place in a world that demanded more than charm. Napoleon's sisters, especially Caroline, fanned the flames, spreading gossip about Joséphine's past and questioning her suitability. They pushed Napoleon to consider younger, fertile women who could give him the heir he craved. Joséphine, sensing the threat, doubled down on her efforts to please him, but her lavish spending and flirtatious nature only added fuel to the fire. The couple's dynamic was shifting. Napoleon, once the lovesick suitor, was now a man consumed by power. His letters to Joséphine grew less frequent, less passionate. Where he once begged for her love, he now issued commands, urging her to act with the dignity befitting his status. Joséphine, meanwhile, clung to her charm as her greatest asset, but it was a weapon losing its edge. The absence of a child became a silent wedge, driving them further apart. Napoleon began to see his marriage not just as a bond of love, but as a political alliance, one that might need to be sacrificed for the sake of his empire. By 1800, the cracks in their marriage were undeniable. Joséphine's insecurity and Napoleon's growing detachment created a vicious cycle. She threw herself into maintaining her beauty, spending hours on her appearance, while he buried himself in plans for conquest and governance. Their home, once a symbol of their shared ambition, became a stage for unspoken tensions. The love that had once burned so brightly was now flickering, threatened by the demands of power and the shadow of an airless future. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French, a moment that should have been the pinnacle of his and Joséphine's shared journey. Joséphine, now Empress, stood beside him in the grandeur of Notre Dame, her elegance captivating the crowd. But beneath the golden coronets and the cheers, their marriage was unraveling. The weight of empire, combined with relentless political pressures and personal betrayals, was pushing their fragile bond to the breaking point. Joséphine's new title came with a spotlight that exposed every flaw in their union, making their differences impossible to ignore. Napoleon's coronation was more than a ceremony. It was a declaration of his vision for a dynasty that would rival Europe's greatest monarchies. Joséphine, with her grace and charm, played the role of empress flawlessly, hosting lavish courts and dazzling foreign dignitaries. Yet her position was precarious. Napoleon's family, led by his scheming siblings, intensified their campaign against her. They whispered to him about her age, her past, and her failure to produce an heir, planting seeds of doubt that grew with each passing year. Napoleon, now 35, was obsessed with securing his legacy. The lack of a child with Joséphine was no longer just a personal disappointment. It was a political liability. Rival courts and advisors began to murmur that a true emperor needed a fertile wife, someone who could ensure the Bonaparte line endured. Joséphine felt the walls closing in. She doubled her efforts to maintain her influence, orchestrating grand balls and cultivating alliances with key figures in Napoleon's circle. But her charm, once her greatest strength, was losing its power over him. Napoleon was no longer the lovesick young officer who had worshipped her. His affairs became more frequent, and he made little effort to hide them. In 1804, he took up with Marie Walewska, a young Polish noblewoman who would later bear him a son. This child, born outside their marriage, was a devastating blow to Joséphine. It proved Napoleon was capable of fathering children, shifting the blame for their childlessness squarely onto her. The knowledge crushed her, and she confided in close friends that she feared divorce was looming. The court was a hotbed of intrigue, and Joséphine was caught in its web. Napoleon's sisters, particularly Pauline, revelled in her vulnerability, spreading rumours to undermine her. Even Joséphine's own children, Hortense and Eugène, were drawn into the drama. Napoleon, who had grown fond of them, began to see them as potential pawns in his dynastic plans, but they couldn't replace the son he craved. Joséphine tried to secure her position by promoting her children's marriages into powerful families, hoping to cement her place in Napoleon's world. Yet these efforts only highlighted her desperation, and Napoleon grew increasingly distant. His attention split between governing an empire and seeking a new bride who could give him what Joséphine could not. Their personal interactions became strained, marked by cold silences and fleeting moments of tenderness. Napoleon still cared for Joséphine. He would later call her the only woman I ever truly loved. But his ambition was stronger than his heart. Joséphine, for her part, was trapped in a gilded cage. She loved the status of empress, but lived in constant fear of losing it. Her spending grew even more extravagant, as if surrounding herself with luxury could shield her from the inevitable. By 1805, as Napoleon prepared for his campaigns in Austria and Russia, the couple's once passionate connection had faded into a formal partnership, held together by duty rather than devotion. The coronation, meant to be their triumph, had instead become a turning point. Joséphine's crown was a symbol of her precarious position, and Napoleon's growing power only widened the gap between them. As he looked to the future, he saw a dynasty that Joséphine could not provide. The love that had once bound them was now a fading echo, drowned out by the demands of empire and the whispers of those who wanted her gone. By 1809, the marriage of Napoleon and Joséphine was a shadow of its former self, strained to the breaking point by years of mistrust, ambition, and the relentless pressure of empire. Napoleon, now at the height of his power as emperor, ruled over a vast dominion, but his need for a legitimate heir had become an obsession that Joséphine could no longer ignore. The love that had once set their hearts ablaze was now a flickering flame, unable to withstand the weight of political necessity and personal betrayals. The final act of their story was not just the end of a marriage, but the unraveling of a dream that had been doomed from the moment they said their vows. Joséphine knew the end was near. Napoleon's affairs, particularly with Marie Walewska, who bore him a son in 1810, confirmed what she had long feared. He could father children, and she could not. This reality was a death knell for their marriage. Napoleon's advisors, eager to secure alliances with Europe's royal houses, pressed him to divorce Joséphine and marry a younger woman who could produce an heir. His family, led by his mother Letizia and sister Caroline, had never stopped their campaign against Joséphine, painting her as unfit for the imperial throne. The court buzzed with names of potential brides, princesses from Austria, Russia, and beyond, who could offer Napoleon the dynasty he craved. Joséphine, despite her charm and cunning, was powerless against this tide. In December 1809, Napoleon made the decision that had been looming for years. In a tearful meeting at the Tuileries Palace, he told Joséphine he would seek a divorce. The scene was heart-wrenching. Napoleon, usually so composed, wept as he spoke, and Joséphine collapsed in grief. She had fought to keep him, using every ounce of her charisma to maintain her place, but the empire's needs outweighed their love. The divorce was formalized on January 10th, 1810, in a public ceremony that masked the private pain. Joséphine was stripped of her title as Empress, but given the courtesy title of Empress Dowager and a generous settlement, including the Château de Malmaison. Napoleon, ever conflicted, ensured she was cared for, a testament to the affection that lingered despite their separation. The divorce revealed the truth at the heart of their doomed marriage. It had always been a union of convenience as much as love. From the start, Joséphine had seen Napoleon as a path to security, while he saw her as a stepping stone to social legitimacy. Their lies on the marriage certificate, her flirtations, his insecurities, and the absence of a child had all chipped away at their bond. Napoleon's relentless ambition and Joséphine's extravagant lifestyle only widened the gap. The rumors of her infidelity, whether true or exaggerated, had eroded his trust, while his own affairs betrayed her. Their love, though genuine at times, was never strong enough to overcome the clash of their personalities and the demands of power. After the divorce, Joséphine retired to Malmaison, where she lived out her days in relative peace, surrounded by her gardens and art. She remained a figure of fascination, hosting visitors and maintaining a quiet dignity. Napoleon married Marie-Louise of Austria in 1810, and she bore him a son, Napoleon II, fulfilling his dynastic hopes. Yet he never forgot Joséphine. He visited her in secret, and when she died in 1814 of pneumonia, he was devastated, reportedly locking himself away to mourn. Even in exile on St. Helena years later, he spoke of her with tenderness, calling her his greatest love. Joséphine's death, just as Napoleon's empire began to crumble, marked the end of an era. Their marriage was doomed because it was built on a foundation of mismatched desires and impossible expectations. Joséphine's charm couldn't secure Napoleon's trust, and his ambition couldn't accommodate her flaws. The love they shared was real but fragile, unable to survive the pressures of an empire that demanded more than either could give. Their story is a tragedy of two people caught in a whirlwind of passion and power, destined to fall apart. If this tale of love and loss has captivated you, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that bring history to life. Your support means everything to us.